Good morning and welcome to our Applied DNA Sciences quarterly webinar. My name is Debbie Bailey and I am the Director of Investor Relations. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. On today's call, we will be hearing first from Dr. James Hayward, President and CEO, followed by Carol Kane-Gray, Chief Financial Officer for the company. Dr. Hayward will conclude and then answer questions from our shareholders. Please note that some of the information you will hear today during our discussion may consist of forward-looking statements, including without limitation those regarding revenue, gross margin, operating expenses, other income and expense, stock-based compensation expense, taxes, earnings per share, and future products. Actual results or trends could differ materially. For more information, please refer to the risk factors discussed in our Form 10-K for fiscal 2014. Applied DNA Sciences assumes no obligation to update any forward-looking statements or information. At this time, I would like to turn the call over to Dr. Hayward.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning to our audience, and thank you for joining us today. And to our new investors, I'd like to recognize those representing institutional funds. Welcome to your first investor call. Our uplisting to the NASDAQ Capital Market took place on the 17th of November in 2014. The response from our customers and potential customers has been uniformly positive in my own interactions with them, and we hear similar comments coming from our sales team. Moreover, while it is hard to quantify, I personally detect a greater general awareness about our company, both from the media, from interested potential investors, and from the potential customers who reach out to us. From our dialogue with investors, I believe that we have already attracted an investor base with a longer view. As shown in this slide, our share price is up nearly 60% since our uplisting, and we are now owned by more than 10% of institutional investors such as General American and Fidelity. Our liquidity is also on the rise, with our trailing 3-month volume averaging 100,000 shares per day, or the equivalent of 6 million shares before our reverse split over a 3-month time course, a volume which we'd never enjoyed before. Our trading volume in dollars is the highest we've ever seen. Since the company uplisted to the NASDAQ Capital Markets, we've experienced increased liquidity in our common stock. For example, our total trading volume for the 3 months pre-uplisting was approximately $7.3 million, compared to just over $20 million for the period immediately after our uplisting through yesterday, which represents an increase of 177%. Now, as Carol Kane-Gray, our CFO, will report in detail momentarily, our revenue for the first quarter of fiscal 2015 was over $1.2 million, the highest revenues we've ever reported. When compared with the prior quarter, Q4 of fiscal 14, our revenues are up 92%. When compared with the first quarter of last year, our revenues are up 108%. We are gaining traction, as seen by our dramatic revenue growth, and we expect this trend to continue in the coming quarters. During the last quarter, we've taken steps to reduce our operating costs in the current calendar year. Now, the combination of our cost savings program with growing revenues takes us that much closer to profitability. Throughout history, there have been disruptive technologies that have altered the current course of technical evolution. Examples include Gutenberg's printing press, Edison's light bulb, Marconi's radio, and Fleming's penicillin. Penicillin was ignored for over a decade until the military began to use it in World War II. There's probably no single technology in human history that has saved and extended as many lives as antibiotics. But most people ignored that proven technology until it hit the market and began saving lives. I believe that applied DNA sciences is in a similar situation. We are making progress on multiple fronts. Our technologies continue to be adopted by early integrators in more and more markets. We gain traction daily and in multiple industry verticals. The company not only has the momentum that comes with adoption by government agencies and multinational companies. We believe we have the only forensic products capable of permanent and flexible authentication marking. Now, many scientists believe that there is no other information storage technology that can match the code of life in terms of its information density, its flexibility, and cost. DNA storage is so dense that it will allow labeling products with far more information than is currently contained in barcodes and similar strategies. Given that DNA is a self-encrypting medium at a molecular scale, yet still in its infancy as a tagant, the impact on global information flows is just beginning. And with our digital DNA, we are at the forefront of this revolution. Signature DNA, signature tDNA, digital DNA, DNA-Net, and others in our family of products will change industries. I firmly believe that the world needs our technology to help end the damage inflicted by counterfeiting and crime. It is now my pleasure to introduce Carol Kane-Gray, our CFO.
Thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. This has certainly been an exciting quarter for Applied DNA Sciences. I would like to spend a few minutes highlighting the finance activities, which will include the cost-cutting measures that have been put in place, in addition to discussing some of the main points in the December 31st, 2014 10Q, which was filed yesterday. As you can see from our balance sheet, as of December 31st, 2014, total current assets increased by $1.7 million to $4.1 million due to an increase in cash and accounts receivable. The liabilities and stockholders' equity on our balance sheet has improved greatly due to the payout of the warrant liability and the promissory notes that were converted into the November 2014 public offering. These two transactions decreased the liabilities on the balance sheet by $2.9 million. Stockholders' equity increased by $4.8 million as a result of the funds received by the public offering. Moving to the income statement, revenues for the first quarter of fiscal 2015 were a record $1.2 million, which is a 108% increase from the $597,000 reported in the same quarter of the prior fiscal year, and a 92% increase compared to the prior quarter ended September 30th, 2014. The increase in revenue for this fiscal year was primarily the result of an increase in revenues from government contract awards of $425,000. The increase was also due to $150,000 in revenues associated with the setup and marking of cotton. 3 customers represented 53% of our total revenues for the quarter ended December 31st, 2014. Revenues from customers outside of the United States continue to contribute to our total revenues. For the first quarter of 2015, 21% of our revenue was from customers located outside of the U.S., We believe that the revenue from the sale of products outside the U.S. will continue to grow in the future. Our Europe, Middle East, and Africa business continues to add distributors around the world. Our diverse and global customer base means less reliance on any one customer, country, or industry, and suggests less concentrated risk. It also demonstrates the continued growth of our products and technologies as they are introduced into new markets. Research and development expenses decreased to $278,000 from $459,000 from the same quarter last year. This decrease was attributable to lower spending on lab supplies. In Q1 2014, we were equipping the new laboratory spaces we had moved into a few months earlier, as well as purchasing components associated with a pilot program. Total operating expenses were $5.1 million compared with $4.4 million in the prior quarter, an increase of $640,000 or 15% for the 3 months ended December 31st, 2014. The increase is primarily attributable to non-cash stock-based compensation for grants awarded to employees during the quarter and an increase in expenses related to the company's uplisting to NASDAQ on November 17, 2014. This increase was partially offset by a decrease of almost $500,000 in legal, consulting, and research and development expenses. Net loss for the 3 months ended December 31st, 2014 was $7.8 million compared with a net loss of $6.3 million for the 3 months ended December 31st, primarily as a result of $2.2 million increase in non-cash expenses. Excluding the non-cash expenses and interest, adjusted EBITDA for the 3 months would have been a negative $1.7 million compared to a negative adjusted EBITDA of $2.6 million for the same quarter last year. The net loss includes non-cash transactions of approximately $6.1 million. These non-cash items have no impact on our liquidity, so our actual cash losses decreased from the same quarter last year. While we have still not caught up to our expenses, we currently have a number of funded pilot studies ongoing, which, if successful, could generate revenues more in line with our current expenses. We believe some of these pilots could come to closure within this calendar year. We continue to manage our expenses, looking to strategically lower costs in line with our current and near future market opportunities. A cost savings plan is being implemented that is designed to reduce our cash expenditures for this calendar year. Several positions and consultants that are no longer related to the company's business plan have been eliminated. Only vacant positions that are related to sales and revenue execution will be considered for hiring as necessary. Our business plan ensures that we have the capacity and expertise to meet our most immediate market needs, as well as being prepared for the needs of our customers in the near future. Also, as mentioned before, legal and consulting fees have been reduced this quarter. In summary, it has been a very busy and positive quarter for Applied DNA Sciences. We are working hard to manage our expenses, turn our pilot studies into commercial contracts, and strategically manage the business for the benefit of all of our shareholders. Finally, as disclosed in the 10-Q and press release, I have decided to step down from my position as Chief Financial Officer to pursue other opportunities, but will remain as a financial consultant to the company. This transition will become effective February 15th. I am quite pleased that I had the opportunity to make substantial contributions to the company's financial initiatives by completing the recent financing, uplisting to NASDAQ, and implementing financial controls throughout the organization. I would like to personally thank Jim Haywood for the opportunity to work with him on many of his strategic initiatives. I know that I leave the company in capable hands with Beth Jansen as the new CFO. I have worked closely with Beth during my tenure here, and I have complete confidence in her abilities to lead the company forward. You will be hearing from Beth on the next quarterly webinar in May. I would now like to ask Jim to return to his report, and I would like to thank all of you for your time and attention.
Well, thank you very much, Carol. And I'd like to take a moment for us to thank Carol for her tireless efforts on behalf of Applied DNA Sciences and all of its stakeholders. She leaves the company stronger than when she came, and she will be sorely missed by all of us. We have the utmost faith in Beth, who has already demonstrated her competence on the job. And before we get to the questions submitted, I'd like to take some time talking about some new initiatives that are really game changers for our company and for the industry. And I've chosen to focus on a single industry vertical for the sake of simplicity. But these game changers, believe me, will impact across a very broad industrial spectrum. And along the way to revealing those game changers, let me just remind you of some of the news we have released in the course of the last week or two. First of all, we announced that we are providing anti-theft technology to European car makers earlier in the quarter. We've signed with a fourth federal agency, a significant relationship for us. We have won Popular Science's Best of What's New in 2014 award. And we have been granted a new patent for the genetic identification of new variants of Pima cotton. That patent has commercial value because Pima is a highly competitive fiber of very high value. It represents only 3% of what is produced in the United States and only 1% of what is produced all over the world. But because it's produced all over the world, very often Pima from other portions of the world are used to dilute American Pima cotton, and now we have the tool in hand to prevent that. So let me get to the revolution that we're referring to, the real game changer in our platform. And that comes from two recent announcements we made, one last week and one yesterday. Now, our typical signature DNA marks are comprised, as shown in this slide, of an optical array with a forensic DNA mark that is the flagship of our company called Signature DNA. And we have methods for analyzing this both on site and in a laboratory setting. On site, the non-forensic method simply utilizes a UV torch, and the inspector can see the visible illumination that comes from the rapid screening optical array by eye. And obviously, since it's done by eye, that is at low resolution. In the laboratory, we can take that to the highest resolution using spectrophotometric methods, and that's typically what's done as part of our identification of the signature DNA mark. However, we announced last week the development of a remarkable multimodal detection system that can work in the field, on site, and utilizes multiple methods of examining our target. The multimodal reader is a screening tool. It is in response to our customers who asked for rapid screening rather than having to wait a day or two for laboratory-based forensic results. And that multimodal tool, small, handheld, can examine fluorescence images in their spectral detail, does image processing and barcode reading, and we have a detailed roadmap for the rollout of technologies that are friendly to the multiple devices that are already in the marketplace. It's handheld and contains reference spectra for specific customers. So a customer can ascertain with absolute certainty that a DNA mark is present on their product. For forensic authentication, as always, we offer laboratory services, and the benefit of forensic authentication in the lab is that it's done by a certified expert, typically with an advanced PhD degree, and that certified expert provides an expert witness document which is suitable for court. The detail of that evaluation includes both sequence and length analysis. But yesterday, we announced an on-site DNA authentication program that will forensically allow the examination of DNA via real-time PCR, and it will identify a customer's unique customer DNA. This allows us to offer to the customer, without sophisticated training, essentially a plug-and-play authentication platform. It's shown here in this slide for textiles, in particular for cotton. And the cotton is simply sampled, inserted into a 96-well sampling real-time PCR device. The processing time on site takes about 5 hours, but it will process up to 96 samples at a single go. It's fast, easy to install, occupies very little space, requires only a laptop computer to operate, and very little training. And we provide that training and a telephone support line, so that in 5 hours, a customer working on product in their factory can have results on the spot. Now, this is truly a game changer. It greatly shortens the time to get product to market, and there are no delays waiting for QC releases, but most importantly, it tightens up leaks in any textile supply chain. Now, with those tools, we can actually secure cotton that has been DNA marked, or we can fiber type cotton to make sure it is the right genus and species, and eventually that it comes from the right locality at any step in the supply chain, from the farm, from the ginner, which is typically where a cotton fiber gets signature T DNA marked. So we use the fiber typing as a diagnostic to ensure that it is the right species. If it's the right species, then we use signature T as the tag and trace tool that allows us to monitor the DNA easily throughout the supply chain and verify the cotton fiber is the correct one anywhere in the supply chain, from the spinner and knitter to the weaver or manufacturer to the trader, and indeed all the way to the retail marketplace to the consumer. So it's traceability from point of origin to point of sale, and now we can empower it all be done without the need for shipping samples and the ability to assay both DNA and optical marks ad hoc. This will have an immediate impact on the industry, and we are arranging licensing agreements to verify that the supply chain remains tight in all relationships. We announced this week that we had completed the marking of 10,000 bales of California Pima cotton, which is already on the seas traveling to Asia for conversion to yarn. And from the yarn, it then travels to India for weaving into finished goods, and packaging until ultimately it returns to the United States for distribution and retail. And with that system, now we can verify at every step in the supply chain that there is compliance with what the retailer has ordered. And this is truly, truly a game changer. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your interest and support, and we'll turn now to the questions that you have forwarded in.
Thank you, Jim. Our first question, we have actually gotten several questions regarding why Carol Kane is resigning after 18 months as CFO of the company.
Well, I guess I'll take that one, Debbie. When I joined Applied DNA Sciences, Jim asked me to help the company to raise funds, uplist to NASDAQ, and implement some financial controls. I have successfully completed all of these tasks, and I'm ready to move on to new challenges. I have no issues with all of the financial reporting or accounting treatment during my time here at Applied DNA Sciences. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Our next question, why does the overhead of this company continuously rise even as there are no profits? Jim?
Well, as Carol mentioned earlier in the presentation, that our cash losses for the quarter actually decreased compared to the same quarter last fiscal year. Much of the increase in our operating expenses is attributable to an increase in non-cash expense. And we both mentioned that the company has implemented financial controls and continues to manage our expenses responsibly.
Thank you, Jim. Next question, are the salaries and options of the officers increasing while they lose money for the stockholders? Carol?
Thanks, Debbie. Well, over the year, the salaries of the officers of the company are actually decreasing. The CEO, the CFO, and CIO have all taken salary cuts as part of the overall cost-cutting measures for the company. Every single employee at Applied DNA Sciences works very hard for the success of the company and the shareholders. All employees have stock options, making everyone even more invested in the success of the company. In order to attract and retain our employees, we must remain competitive in compensating them fairly.
Thank you. What are the administrators of the company planning to do to increase shareholder value? Jim?
Well, as you know, the company does not control share price. What we do control is our operations, and we continue to implement our strategic plan, working tirelessly to expand our customer base and product line in order to grow revenues and to continue to manage our costs and expenses responsibly. We've added distribution throughout Europe and are working very hard to do so under the guidance of Tony Benson, who runs our EMEA operation. We believe if we do all these things, shareholder value will continue to be positively affected as the company moves toward profitability. Investors have been responding to our recent announcements as demonstrated by recent increases in the share price and an increase in ownership of our stock by institutional funds.
Thank you, Jim. Carol, I think this next question is for you. It seems you increased the amount of stock available for stock options to employees. How big an increase is this in shares from previous approved levels? Oh, okay, sorry, that's it.
Okay, Debbie, thank you. Well, the employee option plan was about to expire, so the board of directors, along with our compensation committee, voted to amend the option plan to extend it out for 10 years. Options are granted to employees as part of the compensation package to help attract and retain talented personnel and to ensure that all our shareholders working for the greater good of the company and for the shareholders at all times.
Thank you, Carol. Another question for you. It seems your working capital is about $2.4 million as of the start of the quarter. Your current burn rate is $2.3 million a quarter. Can you explain how you're managing the expenses?
Well, another good question. Management is implementing a cost savings plan that is designed to reduce our expenditures for this calendar year. We continue to manage our expenses, and as I just discussed, our actual cash loss for the quarter decreased.
Thank you, Carol. Jim, we are nearly halfway into the second quarter. Can you give us any idea about Q2 revenues as you did for Q1?
Well, last quarter, when I was able to give you an idea about revenues for this quarter, there were only 2 weeks left in Q1, so we were fairly confident about the final revenues for this quarter. And in fact, we were pleased that they turned out to be better than that. At this time, we are only halfway through our Q2, so it's too early to say with confidence that what our Q2 revenues will be. But we believe we will be able to at least match the revenues of the quarter we just described.
Thank you, Jim. And we have 2 more questions for Carol. What percentage of your revenue gets generated by the U.S. federal government?
Okay, 41% of our revenues for quarter 1 were generated by the U.S. federal government, with the majority of that revenue coming from 2 government contract awards.
Thank you, Carol. And our last question, did foreign exchange rates hurt your revenue in the quarter, and if so, by how much?
No, Debbie, it did not. Our foreign exchange rates did not have a material impact on our revenues for this quarter.
So thank you folks for participating in our Q1 investor call, for sending in your questions and giving us your time. But most importantly, we hope you feel the same excitement that all of the employees at Applied DNA do, and the optimism about our future and the potential for us to really change the way business is done in cases where it's done in such a way that negative impact consumers on the planet. Thank you very much.